On today's episode, we are talking all about the chickpea. I'm going to show you 3 fun and fast ways to transform the chickpea into something that will dazzle. This is Southern Girl Meets Vegetarian Boy. This episode of Southern Girl Meets Vegetarian Boy has been brought to you by GE Appliances. Thank you so much for our wonderful kitchen. On today's episode, we're making chickpea and hearts of palm cake, crispy chickpeas, and chickpea a la bourbon. It's exactly like chickpea a la vodka, except we're using vodka. Oh wait, no, we're using bourbon instead of vodka. I didn't start drinking already, I promise. Okay, let's get started with those chickpea and hearts of palm cake. And you start by chopping up your chickpeas and your hearts of palm. What you're trying to do with this is mimic the texture that you usually see in a seafood cake or a crab cake or something like that, right? I also have nori here. This is roasted seaweed. I've crushed it up with my fingers, and what I'm gonna do is add that so I get a little bit of the flavor of the sea without adding any of the little creatures of the sea. So isn't that the perfect time to do the jellyfish? All the jellyfishes to the dance floor. All the jellyfish to the dance floor. All the jellyfish to the dance floor. All the jellyfish to the dance floor. You just throw that into your food processor before you put in your chickpeas or your hearts of palm. That's about 1 large sheet or 4 of those little tiny snacking sheets. A can of drained chickpeas. These have been cooked. I bought them from the grocery store that way. Feel free to cook your own chickpeas. And then 2 14-ounce cans of hearts of palm drained. This is how they come in spheres. These are delicious if you bread them and fry them. They're crazy good. But today we're gonna chop them up. Like we just drop those in. If you don't have a food processor, it's okay. You can still make this recipe. You just have to do a lot more chopping. I'm pulsing so that the stuff at the bottom doesn't turn to mush before the stuff at the top gets chopped. Just pulse it. Pulse, 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 pulse. You're really trying to just like shred this up a little bit so that everything is kind of like the texture of flaked or crab. See how there's some like smaller bits at the bottom and some larger bits at the top? This is gonna absolutely mimic what you think of as a traditional crab cake. Okay, so from the chickpeas, I reserved 4 tablespoons of the aquafaba, or the liquid that the chickpeas are kind of hanging out in. If you don't have that, you can use an egg. I'm just gonna whip this up. And it'll get real foamy. This is a balloon whisk. It adds more air, easier. It's also really good for thick batters. Like you wanna add in some liquid to a super thick batter, a balloon whisk is really nice for that. Okay, we have those kind of whipped up, looking good. We're gonna add in 1/4 cup of vegan mayonnaise or traditional mayonnaise, either one is fine. 1 to 2 teaspoons of Dijon. You can kind of decide on how much Dijon you like. It's gonna add a little bit of kick, but then also a nice little zip, right? So if you get a vegan Worcestershire, which this is, a teaspoon of that goes in, a teaspoon of seafood seasoning. Seafood spice is a ton of the flavoring agent that you have in any kind of a crab cake or a vegan crab cake. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to replace the flavors that we typically find in a traditional crab cake into our vegetarian crab cakes. Okay, a little bit of salt, a little bit of lemon, because whenever you think of seafood or crab cakes or whatever, you think of lemon, right? So let's put a little zest of lemon in. Whisk all of those wet ingredients together. Now, we go in with our chickpeas and hearts of palm. There's also that nori in there, don't forget, that's adding the flavor of the sea. So here's what I like about this. You could do this with just hearts of palm. You could also use artichokes, that would be fine. You could also use jackfruit. All of those things are gonna have a similar flavor. But what I like about this so much is when you add in that chickpea, you actually are adding protein to this dish. This becomes an entree instead of just an appetizer. So now it's pretty moist, right? We also wanna add in something to dry, because anytime you're making a crab cake or a vegetarian crab cake or any sort of a cake, you add in dry. So 1 cup, I like a seasoned breadcrumb. 1/2 cup of green onions, a couple tablespoons of chopped parsley. Now we give this a little stir. The drying ingredients is what's gonna keep these little babies together. If your mixture gets too warm, throw it in the refrigerator and it makes them easier to form. But usually, if you've worked fast, like we have, you can go straight from mixing to forming and frying. What? Put about a 1/2 inch of oil into your skillet and heat it up over medium low. So you want it to come up about 1/4 inch up those cakes. Just use any kind of a neutral oil that has a high smoke point. Let's form and fry. I'm using a portion scoop. This helps make sure everything is consistent. And then into my hand, I take the top and kind of press it down. I use my middle finger and the inside of my thumb right here to kind of create a flat side. Then you put it into a little bit of our breadcrumbs, and you end up with this gorgeous little crunchy on the outside and super tender plus flavorful on the inside chickpea and hearts palm cake. It's a mouthful, but it'll also be a mouthful when you eat it, so that's good. Okay, let's check our oil to see if it's hot. That means our oil is hot, hot, hot. Oil's hot, hot, hot. We are ready to go in with our crab cakes. So we've built a few, just roll them and drop them. Boom. Hello, princess. This is gonna make about 12 cakes, which is really, really a lot for Darrick and myself. Typically, I'll freeze 1/2 of them. Just as soon as it comes out of the breadcrumbs, I put it onto a sheet tray that's lined with parchment paper, and I freeze them. And they'll last in the freezer for like 3 months. And then whenever I need something, I'll throw into my toaster oven and have crab cakes ready to go. I keep calling them crab cakes, but they're not crab cakes. They're like vegetarian crab cakes. But are people searching for chickpea and hearts and palm cake, or are you searching for vegan crab cakes? So it's a tough thing when you're talking about vegetarian food, figuring out exactly how to name it. Like Darrick, one of his pet peeves is when things are called chick-in, as though like all vegetarians and vegans just don't know how to spell. I want to know your thoughts. Leave them in the comments below. And while you're at it, if you're enjoying this content, please subscribe to our channel. We're coming out with new vegetarian recipes, and we would love for you to be part of our community. All right, let's flip. Yeah, you ready to flip? Who's ready to flip? I'm ready to flip. Are you? Boom! Ow, 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 ow. Boom. I was trying to make a show where I wasn't goofy. I was like, hey guys, I want to seem cool. I don't want to seem goofy. Nobody makes me do that. That just happens. I realize now that it's not the editor's fault. It is my fault for doing things like flip it down, flip it in, flip it down, flip it in, flip it down, flip it in. Ooh, ow. These are gonna cook for about 4 to 5 minutes per side. Once you start to see a little bit of brown on the sides, it's time to flip. Look how good those look, y'all. You wanna fry these kind of low and slow because they need a total of about 15 minutes. Just enough time for the outside to get crunchy, but also for that aquafaba to set up. And you're gonna end up with something that's still nice and tender, but crispy on the outside from all of our breadcrumbs. Look at that angel. Just put them onto a cooling rack over top of a sheet pan. I usually fry off 6 and then freeze 6. I have an aioli that I put a little bit of pesto in. Look at this. Let's put a little bit on there and try this. Look at that. So much gorgeous little texture. Steamy hot and delicious. The inside has all of those flavors that you think about in a traditional crab cake. So you have your seafood seasoning, then you have the flavor of the sea from that nori. There's a beautiful crunch on the outside, and because we use our food processor, there's a nice like crumbly texture, but holds together, just like a crab cake. This is not the only recipe though I'm gonna show you today, transforming the humble chickpea. We're also gonna make some crispy chickpeas that are crazy easy and addictively delicious. But not before I have another bite.
All right, chickpeas, recipe 2, take 1.
Crispy chickpeas are addictive. I said it so slow so I could get your attention. You are gonna wanna make this recipe. The best part about it is it takes no time and you can season it however you want. So I've taken a can of chickpeas and drained them. I'm gonna dry them, but I'm also gonna kind of rough them up a little bit to make sure there's none of those little skins on there. If there's any of the chickpea skins left on, those are gonna burn when we put them into the oil. So just dry off your chickpeas, and while you're drying them, kind of look around for any of those chickpea skins. You can cook your own chickpeas, or you can buy chickpeas that are already cooked. If your canned chickpeas have been cooked too far, they're not gonna fry up that well. They're gonna turn into mush. Like these are canned ones that still really look like chickpeas. They're pretty firm. And I have very, very strong fingers. So I drop a little tester chickpea in there just to make sure it's hot, and if it is, let's go in with the rest of the chickpeas. You wanna dry this off because if you don't, it splatters a ton. It's already gonna get a little crazy. Just go with it. Back up, let it go crazy. What's happening right now is all the moisture that's inside of the chickpeas from them cooking is evaporating. That's why it splatters so much. It's very intense at first, and then it slows down. The cook time is gonna 100% depend on how much liquid is in those chickpeas and the size of the chickpeas. So it's usually about 15 to 20 minutes, but a great visual indicator, when these guys stop bubbling, all of the moisture has been evaporated. When all the moisture has been evaporated, now you have a crispy chickpea. What? That's amazing. It just takes longer than you think it's gonna take. They're gonna turn golden and crispy. If you're gonna think they're done, you're gonna pull them out. They're gonna be good for like a minute, and then they're gonna be sognastic, which is not great. Give them a little stir every so often, just to make sure they're not sticking. This is a protein-packed snack, but you can also use it to top salads or soup. It's a great way to add in some crunch, but also to get that protein that you need. I don't know why protein makes me want to fight, but it does. We're almost done. The bubbling's gonna go way down. That's your indicator. Plus a couple of these little butts are gonna pop open. You're gonna end up with like little chickpea butts. Look at this guy. Ooh, they're very hot. Look at that one. Little chickpea butt. What a cutie. You hear that? Woo! That's hot, be careful. Okay. Now, we just lift them out. I put them into a bowl with a little bit of paper towel just to catch any of that excess oil, and then I take out the paper towel and toss them with the spices. But that'll just make sure that you don't have oily chickpeas. These are delicious to snack on, but they're also absolutely fantastic on top of soup or in a salad. It just adds protein and crunch. Turn off your oil. You can hear them. Can you hear them? They're so hot. That's the sound of a fried chickpea in the afternoon. I pat them dry a little bit, and then ready? You're gonna hear the sound of the crisp. Ready? Woo! Hello! Hello. My bad. Feel free to get creative with the spices. This recipe is more about the technique. I'm using a teaspoon of smoked paprika. If you want these spicy, add a little bit of cayenne in. But I really just want the smoke. I'm using a very coarse sea salt, 1/4 teaspoon. And I just kind of crunch it between my fingers. And then a 1/4 teaspoon of cracked black pepper. Look how pretty they are. You can tell they're crunchy. So good. This one has to be eaten. It's a really nuanced flavor. It's sweet. There's a lot of smoke in there. There's a little floral note. It's peppery. It is just enough to kind of make these chickpeas sing. Paprika, I wish I wouldn't have done that. As soon as I started singing, I regretted it. They're a great little snack. I put them in Darrick's lunch sometimes just so I make sure that he has protein. They're so fun and fancy and crunchy. And that is how you make crispy chickpeas. It's so easy, right? But that's not it. We've made chickpea and hearts of palm cakes. We've made crispy chickpeas, but you all, there's still one more chickpea recipe coming at you. Chickpea a la bourbon. This is an Italian dish with a Kentucky twist. What? Olive vodka sauce is a very easy sauce, but I want to have a Kentucky twist to it, so I'm adding bourbon in place of the vodka. What? This is a very, very easy weeknight dish. It's one of those dishes that comes together so fast. It's also very, very, very good. I don't know what to tell you. You know, sometimes I feel weird trying to sell you on the dishes. I promise that these are good. I wouldn't be trying to get you to make these if they were gross. These are real dishes that Darrick and I eat all of the time. Starts with a little bit of olive oil and then put in 1 diced onion. Let that onion get nice and tender. It's gonna take about 3 or 4 minutes. We're just looking for it to soften up a little bit. This is one of those dishes that I make anytime I can't think of what to cook, because a lot of these ingredients are pantry staples, right? So you're using onion. You can also use frozen onion. I have some garlic. I have fresh garlic. You could 100% use chopped garlic, like a dried garlic. That's no problem. Just a couple seconds on that garlic so it doesn't scorch. And then we're gonna go into the pan with our 28 ounces of crushed tomatoes. This is not tomato sauce, it's crushed tomatoes. Ooh. Already it smells so delicious. I am not opposed to jarred sauces. Gussy up one of your jarred sauces. Turn it into a vodka sauce if you want to, except for we're turning it into a bourbon sauce. I'm gonna bloom in red pepper flakes. They're dried, but as soon as they get into this liquid, they start to really come alive. They soften, they'll make it all nice, like a little kick. If you don't like heat, leave those out. This is all about learning to cook and then finding out which recipes work for you and how they work for you. Look how thick and delicious that already looks. This only needs to cook for a couple of minutes. If you were using diced tomatoes, it's gonna take longer to cook because there's a ton of liquid, but your crushed tomatoes are already so thick. That's why I love them. A little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. You all, I would eat this every single day of my life. I think I'm a 7-year-old. People are like, what do you like to eat? I'm like, I don't know, cinnamon toast, pasta with a red sauce, pasta with a cheese sauce, buttered noodles, baked potatoes. I was like born 6. Okay, this is a 1/4 cup of bourbon. If you don't like bourbon, leave it out. If you want to make this an olive vodka sauce, use vodka instead of the bourbon. I just like bourbon and I always have it at my house. It adds a little bit of smoke, but then also some of that oakiness that you get with like a Chardonnay or something. 1 can of cooked chickpeas, drained. We just put those little bad boys in. We really just need these to warm through because they're already cooked. Unflavored oat milk is my favorite plant-based option for making this. And there's a ton of vegan style parms right now that are absolutely delicious. So using a vegan style parm and oat milk makes this dish vegan, which is wonderful. Use some gluten-free noodles and you have a gluten-free, nut-free, vegan dish that everybody can enjoy. And that's a real win. A cup of cream or oat milk. This is what makes it creamy. It's gonna transform before your eyes. I need to give those chickpeas just a couple of minutes to heat up, and so I'm gonna chop up my fresh herbs, oregano, basil, parsley. Let's go in with our herbs. I'm using a vegan cheese right now. It is a Parmesan style cheese. You can also use Parmesan. It's whatever you wanna do, you all. It's a 1/2 cup. Now we just give that a little stir. Your cheese is gonna start to melt down. I'm gonna add in 12 ounces of cooked pasta. I cooked these earlier, cooled them down. So you're just gonna gently fold this in so that the cheese melts to the noodles, everything warms through, and you all, that's our dish. That's all we have to do. Look at this. That's enough for at least 2 people. I 100% make this whole recipe for just Darrick and I, every single time. And now let's taste. Chickpeas and tomatoes, I swear they should be used together more often. As the chickpeas heat up, they absorb a little bit of that tomato tang, and so they're tender, but they're still texture. You have to trust me about the bourbon, I promise you. It is similar to an olive vodka sauce, but it's not the same. There really is just the nicest little Kentucky kick in there when you taste that whiskey. Oh my God. I promised you chickpeas 3 ways, and 3 ways you got chickpeas. Chickpea and hearts of palm cakes, crispy chickpeas, and chickpea a la bourbon. I hope you love these recipes as much as I do. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time on Southern Girl Meets Vegetarian Boy. And thank you again, GE Appliances, for our beautiful kitchen and for sponsoring this episode. Bye, y'all. Get that power wash done. Get that power wash done. Get that power wash done.
Here we go. Do you stop fooling around with
No.
Here we go. Settle in. And go ahead and stand up straight.
Fix your hair.